My boyfriend slept with my boss and helped her use my credentials to frame me for a workplace accident. I played dumb for a month, then filed a complaint that burned both of their careers. My name is Mara Delaney. I'm 38 years old, and for 14 years, my job was making disasters disappear before anyone in the audience knew they had almost happened. I ran show control automation at the Meridian, one of the biggest mega resorts on the Las Vegas Strip. If a turntable drifted 0.2 of a degree before curtain, I caught it. If a fly cue lagged half a second, I fixed it. If a 300-pound LED drop needed to stop on a mark the size of a playing card, I made sure it did. Nobody clapped for that. They clapped for the dancers, the aerialists, the singers, the fire effects, the impossible illusion of a stage breathing like it was alive. My work existed in the silence between applause, the part where no one died, no one screamed, and the show went on. That was enough for me. Ethan Vale worked at the Meridian too, on the stage management side. He had started as a production assistant 6 years earlier and climbed fast. He was organized, charming, good under pressure. The kind of man who could stand backstage with a headset on, 3 people shouting in his ear, and still sound calm when he called, "Stand by, Q38." We met during Tech Week for a show relaunch. I was in the booth trying to diagnose a fly cue that kept landing 3 inches off its spike mark. Before my screen even flagged the drift, Ethan noticed it from the deck. After the run, he came up to the booth, leaned against the doorway, and said, "If your system is going to try to scare my performers, the least you can do is let me buy you dinner." I liked that. Direct. Sharp. No games. For a while we were good. Not perfect, but good in the way 2 exhausted theater people can be good. We understood impossible schedules. We understood cold takeout at midnight. We understood that sometimes love sounded like, "Did you eat?" texted between cues. We moved in together after a year. We never married, but we lived like people building toward it. Shared rent, shared routines, shared grocery lists stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a stage light. Then Vanessa Ortega arrived. Vanessa was the executive producer of the resident show. Mid-40s, black hair always pinned cleanly at the nape of her neck, tailored suits, calm smile, eyes that made people sit straighter before she even spoke. She had come from a competing property with a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and impossible to impress. Most people admired her. Most people were afraid of her. Ethan caught her attention early. At first, I told myself it made sense. He was ambitious. She rewarded ambition. She pulled him into meetings above his pay grade, praised him in production calls, asked for his opinion when more senior people were in the room. I noticed. I filed it away. That was my first mistake. The distance between Ethan and me didn't happen slowly. It arrived with a new production season. Vanessa greenlit a massive overhaul. New scenic pieces, new automation sequences, new rigging configurations, months of reprogramming compressed into weeks. Everyone's hours exploded. Ethan stopped riding home with me. Then he stopped texting when he would be late. Then he started sleeping at the theater because, according to him, early call tomorrow, easier to stay. I believed him because production crunch was real, but the crunch ended in October. Ethan's late nights did not. He started defending Vanessa in a tone I had never heard from him before. "She's under insane pressure. People don't understand her vision. She's actually thoughtful once you get past the exterior." That last one stayed with me. Vanessa had once made a wardrobe intern cry over a missing cufflink. Thoughtful was not the word I would have chosen. Other things changed too. Ethan started waking up at 4:30 to go to the gym, even though he had always been a snooze button person. He bought new clothes, sharper than anything he needed backstage. He spent 20 minutes on his hair before going to a building where everyone wore black and carried coffee like life support. When I asked, he always had an answer. VIP donor event. Vanessa wants department heads looking more polished. Don't make it weird, Mara. So I didn't. I ran my checks, kept my cue stacks clean, ate dinner standing alone at the kitchen counter, while Ethan came home after midnight, shoes in hand, moving quietly like silence could erase betrayal. Then a flybar almost killed someone. It happened on a Tuesday night during the second show. Fly bar 7 carried a 40-foot steel pipe and a 300-pound LED drop. During a transition, it ran 6 feet past its low trim. 6 feet. That was not drift. That was not lag. That was a catastrophic overshoot. The bar stopped 8 inches above a performer's head. 8 inches between a routine Tuesday and a funeral. The emergency stop triggered. House lights came up. The audience murmured. The show halted for 11 minutes while we ran safety checks. I was in the booth within seconds, pulling logs with my hands steady and my stomach turning cold. The cue file showed the correct target position, but the motion profile had been altered. Someone had changed the acceleration curve and removed a soft limit parameter I had programmed specifically to prevent overshoots. The edit timestamp was 3 days earlier, during a maintenance window. The credential attached to the edit was mine. Except I hadn't made that edit. I knew it the way you know your own handwriting. That change was not mine. I would never remove a soft limit from a fly cue. That was Automation Safety 101. I reported the discrepancy immediately. Then I started digging. The booth access log showed an entry at 2:14 p.m. and exit at 2:47 p.m., a 33-minute session under my workstation account. But I had a receipt from a supply house across town at 2:22 p.m., buying replacement contactors for a dimmer rack. I was physically off property when someone sat at my console and modified that cue. Then I checked corridor badges. Ethan's badge appeared near the production corridor, within minutes of the unauthorized booth entry. Vanessa's office access aligned with the same window. I sat alone in the booth after the second show, staring at the logs while the empty stage below me glowed blue in work light. The picture was forming. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. That night, I went home and found Ethan asleep with his phone tucked under his pillow. I stood in the bedroom doorway for almost a full minute, listening to him breathe. Then I turned around, went to the garage, and started organizing my tool drawers at 3 in the morning. Connectors by gauge, driver bits by size, labels facing forward. Pointless work. Necessary work. Because if my hand stopped moving, I was afraid I would finally understand the truth. Sal Mendoza called me at 5:43 the next morning. He didn't bother with small talk. "You need to come in early," he said, "and bring coffee." Sal was the rigging lead, 22 years in the business, built like a fire hydrant, the kind of man who spoke only when he had something worth saying. If Sal sounded tense, people listened. I got to the Meridian before sunrise. The theater felt different at that hour. Empty casinos still hummed through the walls, but backstage was quiet except for ventilation fans and the metallic groan of cooling rigging motors overhead. Work lights painted everything pale blue and gray. Sal was waiting in the rigging loft, sitting on a road case with his arms folded. I handed him coffee. He took one sip and looked at me carefully before speaking. "Your boyfriend and Vanessa have been sleeping together since at least June." There it was. Not suspicion anymore. Not intuition. A sentence. I didn't react. Or at least, I don't think I did. 14 years in live production teaches you how to stay calm while alarms scream around you. Sal kept talking. "My riggers see everything from the gallery. They didn't say anything because Vanessa signs contracts, and nobody wants to get blacklisted." I stared out across the empty stage below us. The LED wall was dark. Fly bars hung motionless overhead. Everything looked normal. That was the terrifying part. "But the affair isn't why I asked you here," Sal continued. "They've been changing loads on my deck." That snapped my attention back to him. "What?" He reached beside the road case and handed me a folder. Inside were photos of rigging logs. Trim heights modified. Weight loads adjusted. Pick points relocated. Approval signatures. Ethan's signature. Countersigned by Vanessa. None routed through engineering. None through me. A cold feeling spread slowly through my chest. "Bar 7 wasn't an accident," Sal said quietly. "Not exactly." I flipped through the paperwork faster. Every change bypassed standard engineering review. Every change created risk. And every paper trail pointed back toward my department. Why didn't anyone report this? Sal gave me a tired look. I did. He pulled out another document. 3 weeks earlier, he had filed concerns through his union steward regarding unauthorized rigging modifications. The complaint had been escalated to production leadership. To Vanessa, the fox auditing the henhouse. I sat down hard on another road case. My brain started assembling the timeline piece by piece. The affair. The workflow restructuring. Unauthorized booth entries. Edits under my credentials. Safety systems altered. Not random. Organized. Vanessa's contract renewal was coming up in 2 months. Her entire career depended on keeping the resident show running smoothly, efficiently, safely. If anything failed publicly, someone had to absorb the damage. Someone boring. Reliable. Technical. Someone who trusted the wrong people. Me. Sal leaned forward slightly. There's more. He pointed to one of the timestamps. Every time they modified something on my deck, you were somewhere else. Main stage, supply runs, maintenance calls, almost like they waited. I looked at the photos again. He was right. The timing was deliberate. And suddenly, every late-night production emergency, every overnight stay, every distracted smile from Ethan felt less like guilt and more like strategy. I drove home after sunrise, but sat in the garage for almost an hour before going upstairs. Ethan was in the kitchen drinking coffee in one of my old university hoodies. For one dangerous second, he looked exactly like the man I had loved. He smiled when he saw me. "You're home early." I studied his face carefully. How long had he been lying to me? How many times had he kissed me after leaving Vanessa's office? How many dinners had we eaten while he already knew they were setting me up? "You okay?" he asked. "Long night," I said evenly. His eyes narrowed just slightly, searching my face. I smiled back. That was the moment I decided not to confront him. Not yet. People always imagine revenge as screaming. Explosions. Thrown glasses. But real destruction is quieter than that. Real destruction is documentation. The next week became the strangest performance of my life. I built my case during the day and acted normal at night. I pulled badge logs, workstation access histories, approval chains, maintenance reports, queue edit timestamps, production schedules. I cross-referenced everything. Every unauthorized booth session happened while I was verifiably elsewhere. Every unsafe modification tied back to Ethan or Vanessa. Every approval bypass led around engineering review. The pattern became airtight. Meanwhile, Ethan kept pretending we were still us. He asked if I wanted Thai food after work. He touched my lower back while passing me in the kitchen. He kissed my cheek before leaving for the theater. And every time he did, I had to stop myself from recoiling. One night, while he showered, his phone buzzed on the counter. Vanessa. The preview notification appeared for half a second before locking. "Need you in my office before production call. Wear the gray suit." Not even subtle anymore. I set the phone back exactly where it had been. When Ethan came out of the shower, steam curling around him, he smiled lazily and asked, "Did my phone go off?" "Yeah," I said calmly. "Work stuff." He relaxed immediately. That hurt more than the cheating somehow. The confidence. The certainty that I still trusted him. I started documenting financials, too. Transferred my savings into a personal account. Met quietly with a family lawyer across town. Found a 1-bedroom apartment in Henderson with a garage workshop. Rented a storage unit. Moved boxes slowly over 2 weeks, while Ethan worked late with Vanessa. He never noticed. Or maybe he noticed and didn't care. 2 weeks into my silent investigation, Ethan came up to the automation booth during a maintenance window. Clipboard tucked under one arm. Relaxed smile. "Vanessa needs a timing adjustment on the Act 2 fly sequence," he said. "VIP crowd Friday night. Transition's dragging." He slid the paperwork toward me. The request looked clean. Professional. Routine. Except approving it would require disabling the deceleration buffer on 2 flybars. Exactly the kind of shortcut that had nearly killed someone. Ethan leaned casually against the console. "She's under pressure right now," he said softly. "This would really help." There was something almost intimate in the way he said it, like he expected me to protect them. I looked down at the highlighted signature line. My name already marked. Ready. One signature, and this time the paper trail would be legitimate. I glanced back up at him. Beautiful man, calm voice, familiar eyes. Total stranger. "I'll run the calculations," I said. His shoulders loosened instantly. "Perfect. I knew you'd understand." I photographed the form the moment he left. The next morning, I returned it, unsigned, with a formal memo citing the exact compliance violations involved. I copied the technical director. When Ethan read the CC line, something flickered across his face for less than a second. Fear. Then it vanished. "Thanks for being thorough," he said smoothly, and walked away. That afternoon, I started looking into Meridian's regulatory procedures, because exposing an affair would embarrass them. Exposing safety violations tied to state compliance? That would destroy them. That was when I contacted Rachel Okafor from Internal Audit. We had met the previous year during a safety certification review. Rachel was brilliant in the most dangerous possible way. Quiet people who noticed everything. She agreed to meet me the next morning. I brought everything. Badge logs. Queue edits. Approval chains. Rigging photos. Schedules. Alibis. I laid the documents across her desk one by one while she read in complete silence. No reactions. No interruptions. Just focus. After almost an hour, Rachel leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "This isn't an HR issue," she said. I already knew that. "How bad is it?" I asked quietly. She tapped the stack of logs. "Unauthorized modification of safety-critical systems using falsified credentials combined with an unmonitored approval chain?" She met my eyes directly. "If the state discovers this before the resort self-reports it, Meridian could lose operational certification." I felt my pulse slow. Not speed up. Slow. The way it does when shock hardens into clarity. "So they'll take it seriously." Rachel gave a humorless smile. "They won't have a choice." Rachel didn't tell me when to file the complaint. She was too smart for that. But after she said Meridian could lose operational certification, she quietly turned her monitor toward me for a few seconds. The resort's inspection calendar was open. State safety inspection, 8 weeks. Executive contract renewal review, 10 weeks. Then she turned the screen back around like nothing had happened. "This is a shared internal resource," she said calmly. "Anyone in the building can access it." I understood immediately. File too early, and Vanessa would have time to contain the damage. File too late, and the renewal committee might approve her next contract before the findings surfaced. There was a narrow window where everything would collide at once. I walked out of internal audit carrying a folder that suddenly felt heavier than concrete. For the next 4 weeks, I lived 2 separate lives. At work, I became the version of Mara everyone expected. Quiet. Technical. Reliable. I ran my checks, attended production meetings, corrected queue timing, reviewed motor diagnostics, spoke only when necessary. At home, I dismantled my relationship piece by piece. I packed books first, because Ethan never noticed books moving. Then winter clothes. Then toolkits from the garage workshop. Every few days, I loaded another box into my truck and drove it to storage across town. The strangest part was how normal Ethan acted. Some nights he cooked dinner and asked about my day. Some mornings he kissed my forehead before leaving for work. Once, while we were brushing our teeth side by side, he caught my eyes in the mirror and smiled softly, like we were still safe together. I almost asked him why. Not why he cheated. That part was obvious now. Vanessa was powerful, ambitious, intoxicating in the way dangerous people often are. No. I wanted to ask why he chose me as collateral damage. But I stayed quiet. Because silence was buying me time. And time was buying me leverage. Sal kept feeding me documentation from rigging. 2 more discrepancies surfaced during that month. Modified load distributions. Altered trim paths. Both approved by Ethan. Neither reviewed by engineering. Each violation alone might have earned a warning. Together, they painted a picture of systematic bypassing of safety oversight. Exactly the kind of phrase regulators loved. I built folders. Digital copies on my laptop. Encrypted backups on a USB drive in storage. Printed copies with my attorney. Every night before bed, I updated timelines and cross-referenced timestamps. The file grew thicker. So did the knot in my chest. One Thursday evening, Vanessa cornered me after production call. She stood beside the darkened orchestra pit, holding a tablet against her chest. "Mara," she said warmly, "Ethan tells me you've been pushing back harder on approval turnaround lately." There it was. Not accusation. Pressure disguised as concern. I kept my expression neutral. Engineering review takes the time it takes. Her smile stayed perfectly in place. Of course, we all appreciate diligence. But her eyes were cold. Evaluating. Calculating. For the first time, I realized Vanessa still believed she controlled this situation. She thought I was simply becoming difficult. She had no idea I was documenting every step she took. The final week before my filing date, I made my first deliberate move. Production meeting, full department heads present, technical director, union reps, operations scheduling team. Vanessa introduced a revised scenic transition, requiring modified fly timing. Ethan distributed updated paperwork confidently, speaking in that calm, polished voice that used to make me proud of him. I waited until he finished. Then I asked one question. Has this modification completed engineering safety review under state operating protocol? The room went quiet immediately. Not loud quiet. The dangerous kind. The kind where everyone suddenly realizes someone just touched exposed wiring. Ethan answered first. The streamlined workflow already cleared it. I looked directly at him. So engineering sign-off was bypassed? His jaw tightened slightly. Vanessa stepped in smoothly. The revised workflow eliminates redundant approval layers. I opened my folder slowly and removed a printed page from Meridian's compliance handbook. Section 11.4.4. Highlighted. I slid it across the table toward the technical director. The Nevada operating agreement requires engineering review for all safety-critical automation changes. Nobody spoke. I could actually hear one of the lighting techs shifting in his chair. Then I said the sentence that changed the room. I'm formally invoking stop work authority on this modification, pending compliance review. Vanessa's pen stopped moving. Ethan stared at me, like he was trying to decide whether I knew something. The technical director hesitated for 2 full seconds before initialing the stop work form. Once he did, it became official. Documented. Time-stamped. Witnessed. The union reps started writing notes immediately. Vanessa recovered first. We're all trying to keep the production pipeline efficient, she said carefully. I nodded once. Efficiency and compliance aren't mutually exclusive. That line spread through backstage within hours. I heard stagehands repeating it near catering the next morning. Apparently, people remembered the boring engineer speaking up. That same week, Ethan started watching me differently. Tiny things. Longer pauses when I answered questions. Subtle glances during meetings. Like instinct was finally warning him, something underneath the surface had changed. One night after second show, I ran into Vanessa alone in the parking garage. Concrete echoed around us. She stood beside her black Mercedes with her coat folded over one arm. Mara? I stopped walking. She smiled politely. I hope you understand the pressure everyone's under right now. I said nothing. She stepped closer. The renewal committee is watching every metric. Delays, interruptions, operational friction, it all matters. There it was again. Corporate language wrapped around a threat. You've always been reasonable, she continued softly. I'd hate for unnecessary complications to affect how leadership views your department. For a moment, I just looked at her. This woman had slept with my boyfriend, used my credentials to manipulate safety systems, and was now trying to intimidate me into staying quiet. And somehow, she still believed she was the reasonable one. "My department's performance metrics are excellent," I said evenly. Her smile thinned slightly. Then she nodded once and got into her car. I watched her drive away under the garage lights, feeling something inside me settle into place. Fear was disappearing. What replaced it was colder. The filing date arrived on a Monday morning. I woke up before dawn. Ethan was asleep beside me, one arm stretched across the empty half of the bed where I no longer slept close enough to touch. I studied him for a long moment. Then I got up quietly, dressed, and drove to the Meridian while the strip was still glowing against the dark desert sky. I parked in Employee Structure B, sat in my truck, opened the evidence folder one last time. 27 pages. Cross-referenced. Increased. Badge logs. Q edits. Rigging discrepancies. Unauthorized approvals. Alibis. Timeline summaries. Everything. I uploaded the complaint through Meridian's internal compliance portal at 6:14 a.m. The system automatically copied internal audit, legal, HR, operations leadership, and regulatory compliance. Case number generated within 30 seconds. Formal investigation initiated by noon. I sat there staring at the confirmation screen while adrenaline moved slowly through my body. No screaming, no revenge fantasy satisfaction. Just inevitability. Like watching a rigged structure finally collapse under the weight it was never designed to carry. When I walked into the theater later that morning, Ethan smiled at me from across the production corridor, completely unaware that his entire life had already started burning down. The investigation moved faster than I expected. That was the thing about corporations. People joked about HR and compliance departments until liability entered the room. Once lawyers smelled regulatory exposure, everything accelerated. Within 48 hours, internal audit had pulled independent badge access reports. Within 3 days, the automation vendor had been contacted for external Q system audit verification. By the end of the week, the operations VP personally requested engineering documentation from every production venue in the resort. People noticed. Nobody said it directly at first, but backstage atmospheres change fast. Conversations stop when certain people walk into rooms. Eyes linger half a second too long. Production assistants suddenly become fascinated by their phones. Everyone knew something was happening. Vanessa found out officially on Thursday afternoon. We were midway through a production meeting when the operations VP's assistant entered quietly and approached her chair. "Ms. Ortega, legal needs you upstairs immediately." The room froze. Vanessa's expression barely changed, but I saw her fingers tighten around her pen. She stood gracefully, excused herself, and walked out with the same composed posture she always carried. But the second the door shut behind her, every person in that room looked at someone else. Nobody looked at me. That almost made it worse. Ethan's phone buzzed 3 times in under a minute. He glanced down at the screen, and for the first time in years, I watched genuine fear crack across his face. He left the meeting 5 minutes later. Neither of them came back. That evening, I moved the last of my things out of the apartment. Not angrily. Methodically. Tool cases from the garage. Documentation binders. The framed photo of my father teaching me how to solder when I was 13. I left the furniture. Left the dishes. Left the couch Ethan always fell asleep on after late shows. I only took what still felt like mine. Then I drove to Henderson and unloaded the final boxes into my new apartment. At 9:17 p.m., Ethan called. I let it ring. Again. 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 9 missed calls. I answered the 10th. "Where are you?" he asked immediately. His voice sounded controlled, but stretched too tight underneath. "Out." "Mara," he exhaled shakily. "Why is half the apartment empty?" I leaned against the kitchen counter of my new place and looked around at unopened boxes. "Because I moved out." Silence. Then, carefully, "Can we not do this over the phone?" "We're way past that." Another silence. Longer this time. Finally, he said quietly, "What's going on?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the audacity of the question physically hurt. I have booth access logs showing your badge entering restricted production corridors during unauthorized edits under my credentials, I said calmly. I have queue system modifications linked to safety violations. I have approval chain documentation bypassing engineering review. And I have a formal complaint filed through Meridian Compliance as of Monday morning. Dead silence. I could hear him breathing. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Flat. Cold. The real Ethan underneath the performance. You should have talked to me first. There it was. Not denial. Not apology. Damage control. I closed my eyes briefly. 4 years together, and in the end, his first instinct was still protecting himself. I did talk to you, I said softly. Every night you came home and lied to my face. Mara, my lawyer will contact you Monday. That finally cracked him. Mara, please. Vanessa pressured me. Things got out of control. You don't understand how complicated this became. Complicated. Like nearly killing a performer was an accounting error. I leaned my head back against the wall. Did you ever plan to stop? I asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. When he finally spoke again, his voice sounded smaller. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. That sentence lodged somewhere deep inside me, like broken glass. Because he meant it. He truly believed betrayal only counted if he personally intended emotional damage. Everything else, the lying, the manipulation, the safety violations, using my credentials, those were apparently just unfortunate side effects. I hung up without another word. The next morning, walking into the Meridian felt like stepping onto a battlefield where nobody had officially declared war yet. People watched me. Subtly. The technical director pulled me aside before first rehearsal. You doing okay? He asked carefully. I knew immediately what had happened. Ethan had started talking. Concerned boyfriend narrative. Emotionally unstable engineer. Obsessive behavior. Documentation fixation. He was trying to plant doubt before the investigation conclusions landed. 14 years of flawless operational history, and suddenly, someone was checking whether I was mentally stable enough to run automation. That one hurt. More than I expected. Because reputations in production environments are everything. Nobody hires the engineer people whisper about. I'm fine, I said evenly. The technical director studied me another second, before nodding slowly. Good, just checking. I ran the show that night perfectly. Every cue landed. Every trim hit. Every motor behaved exactly as programmed. Meanwhile, Ethan's version of events started spreading quietly through backstage. He told people he was worried about me. Said I'd become withdrawn lately.
Paranoid.
Overly fixated on procedural documentation. The strategy might have worked if people hadn't compared notes. But theater crews survive on gossip the way casinos survive on oxygen. Within days, 3 different people mentioned Ethan's concerns to Sal. And Sal, being Sal, answered the same way every time. Mara's been the calmest person in this building for 14 years. If she's suddenly documenting everything, maybe ask why. That shut down a lot of whispers. The investigation expanded the following week. Internal audit discovered Vanessa had restructured approval chains without authorization from operations leadership. 3 separate safety modifications approved by Ethan lacked mandatory engineering review. The flybar incident was officially reclassified from equipment malfunction to unauthorized system modification. That triggered mandatory state reporting. And once the state got involved, the atmosphere inside Meridian shifted from nervous to terrified. Insurance representatives arrived. Legal teams started appearing backstage. Department heads stopped joking during production calls. Vanessa hired an attorney. Then Ethan hired a different one. Neither of them could stop what was already moving. The Nevada Division of Industrial Relations arrived exactly 4 weeks after my filing. 2 inspectors. 3 full days on site. Badge records. Safety reviews. Rigging audits. Automation logs. By the time they left, Meridian's executive offices looked like a funeral home. Then came the findings. 4 citations. Unauthorized automation modifications. Compliance failures. Unmonitored approval restructuring. Failure to report a near-miss incident correctly. The resort's insurance carrier nearly lost their minds. Apparently, insurers become very interested when they discover executives have been secretly modifying safety systems behind engineering oversight. Vanessa's contract renewal meeting happened the following Tuesday. She entered expecting to pitch a 3-year expansion plan. Instead, waiting inside the conference room were the operations VP, general counsel, internal audit leadership, and insurance representatives holding copies of the state findings. Her renewal was denied on the spot. Contract terminated. 30-day separation. No executive severance package beyond minimum obligations. No recommendation. No public statement praising her leadership. Just a banker's box and security escort procedures. I watched her leave 2 days later. I was inside the automation booth running pre-show checks when security escorted her down the production corridor. The hallway had emptied ahead of her arrival. Word had spread, and suddenly everyone found reasons to be somewhere else. Vanessa paused outside my booth door. For a second, we just looked at each other through the glass. Then she opened the door halfway. The security officer immediately stepped closer behind her. Vanessa ignored him. "You could have come to me," she said quietly. Even now, she sounded controlled. Professional. Like this was still a negotiation between equals. I kept my eyes on my monitors. "We are handling it professionally," I replied. "The state, legal, and your insurance carrier are all very involved." Something flashed across her face then. Real anger. Real hatred. Gone almost instantly. She picked up her box and walked away. The loudest person in every room left the building in complete silence. 2 days later, Ethan was terminated too. Unauthorized system access. Falsification of engineering approvals. Violation of safety protocols. Escorted out. Badge deactivated before he even reached the parking garage. I didn't watch him leave. I couldn't decide whether that was strength or cowardice. Maybe both. That night, I ran the show exactly like always. Q1 verified. Q2 verified. House opened at 8. Audience applauded on schedule. And underneath the applause, hidden inside the machinery no one saw, the systems finally ran clean again. The strangest part about destroying 2 people's careers was how normal everything still looked afterward. The fountains outside the Meridian still danced every half hour. Tourists still crowded the casino floor, holding oversized margaritas and taking blurry selfies beneath the chandeliers. The resident show still opened at 8 sharp every night. Vegas doesn't stop for heartbreak. It barely slows down for catastrophe. 3 days after Ethan's termination, Sal came up to the booth after second show, carrying a paper gift bag. He set it beside my console. "The crew took up a collection," he said. I frowned. "Sal, don't make it weird." Inside was a ridiculously expensive bottle of specialty hot sauce from a place off Fremont that I'd once mentioned liking during load-in months earlier. I stared at it for a second too long. Because after weeks of lies and investigations and lawyers, the simple fact that people had quietly paid attention to something I liked almost broke me. Sal leaned against the booth doorway. "You know," he said casually, "half the crew thought you'd quit." "Thought about it." "But?" I looked out through the booth glass toward the stage below. Technicians moved scenery into preset positions beneath blue work lights. Motors hummed softly overhead. Familiar sounds, familiar systems. My name was on those systems for 14 years before they tried to weaponize them, I said quietly. "I'm not giving that away." Sal nodded once like he understood exactly. Then he went home. The divorce, well, separation technically, moved quickly. Ethan's attorney requested mediation first. My lawyer declined. There wasn't much left to fight over anyway. No house. No children. Just a shared apartment neither of us wanted anymore, and the ruins of a relationship that looked embarrassingly fragile once the lies were stripped away. Ethan tried contacting me twice directly after the lawyers got involved. The first message came through email. A long paragraph about mistakes, pressure, confusion, and how Vanessa had manipulated him emotionally during an intense production cycle. I deleted it halfway through. The second attempt came through a mutual colleague from stage management. Apparently, Ethan wanted one honest conversation closure. Closure. Like betrayal was a theater exercise that ended with everyone hugging backstage. I declined that too. There are some explanations that don't matter once the damage becomes structural. And what Ethan did wasn't one bad choice. It was months of choices. Repeated. Calculated. Sustained. The state citations became public record 6 months later. That mattered more than the terminations. Because terminations can be explained away in interviews. Corporate restructuring. Creative differences. Leadership transition. But regulatory findings attached to your name? Those follow you quietly, forever. Any venue pulling compliance history would see it immediately. Unauthorized safety modifications. Approval falsification. Credential misuse. Small phrases capable of ending careers before interviews even begin. Last I heard, Vanessa had moved into consulting work for minor regional productions outside Nevada. Not headline venues. Not strip properties. Smaller contracts. Temporary work. The kind given to people no major insurer fully trusts anymore. Ethan landed at a corporate events company handling convention staging and trade shows. No resident productions. No major theatrical oversight. No safety authority. Just portable LED walls and sponsored product launches in hotel ballrooms. Funny how fast glamorous people become ordinary once the right paperwork surfaces. Meanwhile, Meridian changed almost everything. The resort's new entertainment VP met with me during her first week. Her name was Celia Brooks, former operations executive from Chicago, sharp-eyed, efficient, the kind of woman who actually read investigation reports instead of delegating them. She invited me into her office and asked one question. What do you need to make sure this never happens again? I had my answer ready. Restore engineering authority over all safety modifications, audit every system change during the compromised period, and replace booth access with biometric authentication. She approved all three before the meeting ended. Within weeks, the entire approval structure changed. No more routing engineering around stage management. No more overnight modifications without review. No more shared workstation access protected by outdated badge overrides. The show actually ran better afterward. Not because Vanessa was gone. Because fear was gone. Sal told me his riggers finally stopped double-checking every overnight load adjustment before rehearsal. They sleep better now, he admitted one night during preset. So did I. 3 months later, Meridian created a new position. Director of Show Systems and Safety Compliance. The title sounded corporate and slightly ridiculous, but the meaning underneath it mattered. Every automation modification, every rigging adjustment, every safety protocol change across all 3 entertainment venues now required my sign-off. No more hidden workflow restructuring. No more bypasses. No more surprises. Celia admitted privately that the role existed because of my investigation. Legal wanted structural protection, she said. Apparently, 27 pages of documentation can reshape an organization chart. I accepted the position the same day. The raise was nice. The authority mattered more. After everything settled, life became quieter in ways I didn't expect. I moved fully into the Henderson apartment and converted the garage into a workshop. Shelves of connectors, diagnostic tools, spare servo assemblies, half-finished automation prototypes I tinkered with when I couldn't sleep. I started consulting occasionally for smaller theaters around Vegas. Community venues. Dinner productions. Places where people appreciated competence because they genuinely couldn't afford mistakes. I still didn't date. Not because I hated men. Not because I stopped believing in relationships. I was just tired. Tired in the deep structural way systems get tired after overload. Healing, I learned, isn't dramatic. It's repetitive. Quiet. Daily. One evening, about 8 months after the investigation ended, Sal invited me to his daughter's quinceañera. Huge rented hall. Too much food. Loud music. 3 generations dancing under colored lights while little kids chased balloons between tables. At one point, Sal's wife shoved a plate into my hands and told me I looked too skinny for somebody winning this hard. I laughed harder than I had in months. Driving home afterward, I took the long route down the strip. The meridian glowed against the desert sky, exactly like it always had. Tourists crowded outside. Music echoed through open casino doors. And somewhere high above the audience, hidden behind walls and catwalks and blackout curtains, automation systems moved perfectly on time, because someone was finally protecting them properly again. At a red light, I caught my reflection faintly in the truck window. Older than before. More tired. But steadier somehow. Ethan and Vanessa had mistaken quietness for weakness. That was their fatal misunderstanding. Because quiet people notice everything. And when quiet people finally decide to stop absorbing damage, the collapse is usually permanent.